Many estate plans silently fail, not because the documents are wrong or the beneficiaries are mislabeled, but because the real goal of the plan goes unmet. You've probably seen it, an inheritance that triggered tension, resentment, or even outright conflict. And yet, on paper, everything looked perfectly in order. So, what was missing? What caused these silent failures? That's what we're going to be unpacking in today's video. I want to start out this conversation with a thought experiment. Imagine the day your child is born, you're handed a complete list of every struggle that they'll face in life. A broken bone at 8, the death of their best friend in their teens, a crushing breakup in their 20s that spirals into years of emotional struggle, a major career failure in their 30s, and so on. Along with this list, however, you're handed a magic pen. This pen can erase any of those struggles, some, all, or none. The choice is yours. Now, our first instinct is to probably start crossing out quite a few things, especially the painful struggles. But if we pause and reflect on our own lives, we recognize something much deeper. It's often the struggle that shapes us, the adversity that forms character, the hardship that teaches us who we are and forces some personal growth. And because of that, many of us might hesitate now. We might even leave the list untouched. And yet, when it comes to estate planning, we often do the exact opposite. We try to remove every obstacle. We gift money without context, without clarity, without conversation. We delay giving as long as possible, thinking more is better. We assume the money is the gift, but the truth is it's only part of the gift. The real value is the intention, the philosophy, the preparation that we pass along with it. And that's the big idea we're going to be exploring in today's video. What do I actually want this money to do for the people that I love the most? And how do we design an estate plan that supports that beyond just the legal documents? Here's a big flaw that I see in most traditional estate plans, and it's where a lot of silent failures start. They're focused too much on tactics. In most advisor or attorney offices, the conversation typically revolves around documents. Should you use a simple will or a more complex trust? How can we maximize the gift at the end of life? And when things get quote unquote advanced, the focus often turns to minimizing taxes. How do we avoid and minimize the 10-year IRA rules? Should we use the alphabet soup trusts like CRUTs, GRATs, or FLPs? Now, don't get me wrong, documents matter. Tax minimization matters. But a estate plan can fail even if it's technically perfect. Because tactics aren't a plan, strategy is. And the strategy starts with a question that feels almost too simple. What is the money actually for? Now, when I ask retirees that, I usually hear something like, I just want to help my kids out as much as I can, or I want them to have a better life than we had. Now, these are thoughtful goals, but they're also incredibly vague. It's like saying your New Year's resolution is to, quote unquote, get in better shape. Well, better shape how? Lose weight, build strength, improve endurance. If you go to the gym for a day, you're technically in better shape. And so how will we know when you're in better shape without specificity? So when someone says, I just want to help my kids out as much as I can, my next question is, what does that actually mean to you? And before you answer, keep that thought experiment that we covered at the beginning of this video in mind, the one about erasing your child's struggles. Because when it comes to wealth, more isn't always better. In fact, more without intention can sometimes do more harm than good. On the screen, I've laid out a few examples to help bring more clarity to this idea of intent. First, you might have what I'd call a baseline goal, leaving a specific amount to each heir with no strings attached. That's clean, that's simple, that's completely fine. But let's be honest, no strings means no control. They could blow it all in one day on a car, a boat, or day trading. And the question is, does that bother you? You worked really hard to build this wealth. Are you someone that's going to be okay with someone who didn't work for it, burning through it in a year? Does this match your values? Specifying an amount or even a range not only adds clarity, but it helps you answer another question. At what point is an inheritance too much? Are you comfortable giving so much that they have the option to never work? Or just enough that they have a few more options? Next, you might want to create a safety net. Maybe you have a child who struggles with responsibility, or maybe they chose a career they love that just doesn't pay very well. In that case, you're not trying to enable, you're trying to support. And that likely means more constraints. Maybe you might want to use something called a spendthrift trust, where you are able to control distributions on an ongoing basis. You have rules around those distributions. The money's not freely available. And then you have it managed by a professional trustee who controls both the investment methodology as well as some of those additional outflows. Similarly, if your goal is to build generational wealth, then structure matters even more, because history shows it only takes one generation of bad decisions to undo decades of discipline. And finally, maybe your goal is to maximize enjoyment or utility. Not someday, but while you're still alive to see it. That's where thoughtful lifetime gifting comes in. Now, we'll explore this idea a little bit more here in a second. But for now, let's shift from theory to structure. Let's first discuss your starting point in this planning process, and then I walk you through 3 core reasons many estate plans silently fail, even when they look good on paper. So where do we actually start in building a better estate plan? Well, it begins with a simple but often overlooked question: what is your plan capable of? And that's not a one-time question, it's an iterative process. Because what your plan's capable of changes as your life evolves. In our planning process, we typically begin with the retirement plan itself. That's where your priorities typically live: travel, lifestyle, healthcare, not just what you're leaving behind. For most people, inheritance is often a secondary goal. Once we understand your retirement trajectory, we can then start to model out what kind of estate your plan is able to produce. Here's an example. This couple has $3 million in assets. Now, as we project forward, we see that even in poor market conditions, they're likely to retain a substantial estate. In stronger scenarios, their wealth could more than triple. Now, this range of outcome is where the strategy starts to build. With 2 heirs, this couple could absolutely create a meaningful safety net. They could even build true generational wealth if that was so the goal. Or they might look at these numbers and say, whoa, that's way more than we have ever planned to leave behind. And in that case, the conversation starts to shift. Maybe it's time to increase spending on their own lives, enjoy more of what they've built. Maybe it's time to start gifting now while they can still see that impact. This is why this is an iterative process. Every lever we pull, like spending more, gifting earlier, or increasing constraints, shapes a different trajectory of the plan. Now, let's dive into the first of the 3 core failures I see in many estate plans, and I'll share real-world examples along the way to bring this to life. Failure number 1, you have a clear goal, but your plan doesn't match that goal. Take a common scenario. You have an heir who struggles with money, poor spending habits, unstable work history, or maybe even just quite a bit of bad luck. As a parent, you don't want to enable bad behavior, but you do want to make sure they're never destitute. You might want to leave a safety net. I've heard this goal in different forms from multiple retirees, but when you look at the estate plan, it's often the same default setup. The kids inherit all of the money outright at death. No constraints typically. The hope is that the amount is big enough that they quote unquote can't screw it up. The reality, however, if someone lacks good money habits, they will screw it up no matter how big that check is. Is that their fault? Well, maybe. But more importantly, it's a failure of alignment. You had a goal, but your plan didn't support it. Now, what might be a better approach? A spendthrift trust, as I was talking about before. You put assets into a trust with constraints. Only, let's say, a modest annual distribution of 3 to 6%. It's professionally managed, invested in line with your goals, and inaccessible beyond that. This would be a true safety net. Another common goal here: I want to give my kids a better life than I had. More options, more experiences. If that's a goal, ask yourself, does waiting until the end of life to transfer wealth really support that? Let's say you're 65, your youngest child is 35. If you live to 85, right around normal life expectancy for your age, that child is 55 by the time they receive their inheritance. What kind of impact is that gift having at that stage of life? Many of you watching have lived this. You spent decades building your own wealth, and then one day a parent passes and you inherit a few $100,000. It's appreciated, no doubt, but it's not life-changing, it's just excess. But what if some of that money could have come earlier? Smaller gifts at some more pivotal moments in your life. Could that have helped you retire earlier? Take an unforgettable family trip, launch a business. That's the difference between a windfall and a life changer. And this is where we move from thinking about time value of money to something even more personal: age value of money. At 90, your capacity to enjoy a dollar is not the same as it was when you were 50 or even 30. Health, energy, mobility, even curiosity tend to decline as you age. A trip to Europe at 50 is not the same at 75. And it's the same for your children. If you've received an inheritance, think about how different that experience would have been if it had come 5, 10, or 20 years earlier. In many cases, it's not just more valuable, it's transformational. Your estate plan and heirs face the same dilemma. The second failure, and arguably the most damaging, is silence. Some families treat money like a taboo topic. They just don't talk about it. But here's the truth: silence almost always hurts your estate plan. I see this constantly with retirees who are expecting an inheritance but don't know how much. Their parents are tight-lipped. Their heirs know they have wealth, but they have no idea what's coming or if anything is coming at all. And what do most heirs do in this situation? They assume nothing is coming. Logically, they plan their lives without any expectation of an inheritance. Now, not talking about money might sound humble, but from a planning perspective, it means that any inheritance becomes a windfall, a surprise, excess. And excess is rarely handled with the same discipline as expected wealth. But here's the real question. If you are going to leave money to your heirs, what's the benefit of telling them nothing ahead of time? They're going to find out eventually. And if they knew earlier, even with just a range, they can incorporate that into their own plan and get more from that inheritance. They can manage taxes better. They can make more informed decisions around work, giving, and investing. Good communication leads to better outcomes, period. And let's go back to the safety net example, only now the situation gets a little bit trickier. The parent decides to create a spendthrift trust for one child. Sensible enough. But then they name their eldest child, the more responsible one, as the trustee. That eldest child now has control over distributions. They may control the investment strategy. They might even have discretion to release more funds based on life events or certain milestones that their younger sibling reaches. That's a massive responsibility and a potential emotional landmine. Now imagine the beneficiary asks for more money for something maybe imprudent. That trustee has a choice: enforce your wishes and strain the sibling relationship, or cave and preserve the peace. You effectively cast one child as the gatekeeper over the other, and you did it without warning, without conversation, and without giving them a chance to opt out. That's not just a recipe for friction, it's a setup for resentment. And it gets worse. Imagine the beneficiary finds out after your death that their inheritance is heavily constrained. Here's $1 million, but you can only access $20,000 a year. Objectively, that's incredibly generous. But without any context or prior conversation, it feels like control, like mistrust, like you're trying to manage them from beyond the grave. Now, I get it. These conversations aren't easy, but silence isn't protection, it's avoidance. Communication is how you pass down more than just wealth. You pass down your values, expectations, intent. Ideally, you do this while you're still alive, through conversations that not only clarify your thinking, but prepare your heirs. At the very least, you should include a legacy letter in your estate plan, something that explains what you did and, more importantly, why you did it. Because when you're no longer around to explain your decisions, your words may be the only bridge between your intent and their understanding. The third failure I see way too often is surprise. It's related to silence, but they're not the same. Silence is the absence of communication. Surprise is the result of miscommunication. It's when your words created one set of expectations, but your actions delivered something else. Both are communication failures, but surprise is often more emotionally charged because it feels like a betrayal of trust. Let me show you what this might look like. Take this scenario. The parents always said they believed in an equal split between their two children, but when the estate is distributed, it doesn't really look equal. The son, a lower earning artist, receives more in total dollars, but it's all IRA accounts. The daughter, a corporate executive, gets Roth IRAs and taxable accounts. Tax-wise, it's roughly even. But if their heirs don't understand the tax mechanics, and let's be honest, most don't, it looks unfair. Why did he get more? Why do I have to pay taxes and she doesn't? This wasn't bad planning, it was actually quite smart tax-aware structuring. But it failed emotionally because the methodology was never explained. The message they had been hearing didn't match the math. Or take another case. The will splits the estate 30% to the son, 40% to the daughter, and 30% to charity. The logic is sound. The son received significant financial support earlier in life. The daughter didn't. The parents were also passionate about a particular cause, though that passion was never deeply shared with the family. Without context, this plan feels cold. The son wonders if he did something wrong. The daughter wonders if the charity meant just as much to their parents as she did. They may have heard one thing growing up, but the documents now say something, in their mind, completely different. And the actions, as they say, speak louder than words. That's the danger of surprise. Even thoughtful, well-reasoned plans can cause harm when communication doesn't match execution. These are situations we see all the time. What should be an incredibly generous and meaningful gesture ends up turning sour, not because of bad intent, but because of poor alignment. So how do you build a better estate plan? Well, here are a few tips. First, start with intention. Don't just ask, how much do I want to leave? Ask, what do I actually want this money to accomplish or do? What's the purpose? And what kind of things could get in the way? Have real conversations with your heirs, not just once, but multiple times. As your own clarity increases, your communication should become more specific. It's fine to start vague in your 60s, but as the future becomes more defined, so should your conversations. Collaborate when you can. See if your heirs' values align with yours. If they don't, and this really matters to you, you may need to adjust the structure of your gift to reflect that. Leave a legacy letter. Put into words the story behind your wealth, your hopes, your values. This isn't about control, it's about context. It's the why behind the what. And if it fits your situation, consider gifting during your life. Your heirs benefit while they're young enough to use it, and you get to see that impact. In a way, the gift gives back to you as well. This video took a different angle on estate planning, less about the legalese, more about real life outcomes. Because sometimes the technical stuff matters less than the simple, thoughtful planning and honest communication. If you found this video helpful and want to explore the more technical side of estate planning, tax savings, gift strategies, trust, I've got a video right here with 3 unconventional ideas to help you pass on more wealth and do it more efficiently. Click here to learn more, and always remember, you don't need more money, you need a better plan. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.